they had a program that has been shown by one of our major universities to increase attendance, and they want to scrap it. It's just crazy.
Well, this isn't really part of this conversation, so we're going to fly by the seat of our pants a little bit here, because I'm not saying the numbers are great, but I'm saying it's important to have context for what education and absences mean. So this is the report that Luxon's constantly talking about. 46% of students met the criteria for regular attendance present more than 90% of the term. This is a decrease, yada yada yada. But what's important to know is what were the other percentages, and you can see it's dropped in the last wee while. So it's definitely gone down. But I did read, I should have highlighted it, there was a reason for it. And it had to do with things like winter, here we go, challenges due to COVID-19. Short term. Now, I'm not doing this to throw it back in Luxon's face, not an excuse. It's just that let's explain the whole thing rather than just letting him have his bullet point. So this is what it says in the report. Short-term illnesses / medical absences continue to be the main driver of non-attendance in Term 3 2023. The level of illness is associated with a continued incident of COVID-19 and winter illnesses. The requirement for students and staff to self-isolate for 7 days if they tested positive for COVID-19 was still in place during the first part of Term 3. So, of course, if that happened, right, remember you can only be away one day out of every 2 weeks. So if you have 7 days away, which means you're away for 5 days, that's immediately fucked you for the whole term. So one case of COVID, if you've got COVID and you're off for a week, then you're not 90% for the whole term. So this is one of the things it's saying. First place, it was lifted from 15th of August, right? So there is a reason. So the thing about this that we always do, and I always want to see journalists do, and they never really do, is to let the politician use the talking point and then go, why is that? So Mr. Luxon, why were what we call full-time attenders only there for 46% of the term? Why is that? We get the number, but why? And this will actually show you as well the actual numbers. So regular attendance, that's there for more than 90% of the term, 46%. Irregular attendance, so they're there for more than 80% and up to 90% of the term, 28%. Moderate absence, that's irregular absence, Moderate absence, that's more than 70% and up to 80% of the time, 12%. And chronic absence, that they're only there for 70% or less, is 13%. Now, for me, this is the one that matters most, chronic absence. This is the one, moderate absence, which is still concerning, because let's say they're there 75% of the time. That means they're missing 1 day every 4. That's a day a week, a bit more than that. That feels like it's too much, yeah? But if you have a 9-week term and you're off for COVID and you're out for 5 days, then that already puts you straight to 90%. So I just think it's important, whether you think this is a coverall or not, that we see that the numbers Mr. Luxon are giving are accurate, right? 46%. But he doesn't explain what that is, 90% of the term. He doesn't explain that COVID stand-downs were still in place. And he doesn't also explain what irregular absence, which could be 89%. So those two together are about 75%. So about 3/4 of the students are there 80% of the time and more during a time when there was a 7-day COVID stand-down, Chewy. That's it. You now at least have the accurate information. I'm not going to comment on whether that's a cover-all for the good or bad numbers, but you have it. So now we can be accurate, Chewy.
I love this though. This absolutely shows what they'll do. Yes, the numbers are technically correct, but removed from all context, that paints a very different picture, right? If you're only going to quote the 45%,
yeah,
then people will draw their own conclusions that, like, what? Over half of students are absent, and that can mean whatever I want it to mean? Yeah, don't spell it out. Don't spell it out. It plays into the narrative. People will fill their own conclusions that these guys are dealing meth for the gangs or doing ram raids or something like that, rather than being offset for a week.
So if the last week of the term, well, they're normally 9 or 10 weeks, let's call it 10 weeks, and there's a couple of public holidays in there, so let's go times 5 and let's go -2. So let's say it's 48 school days, right? Times that by 0.89, so that would slip into the second one. So if you're away for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7... If you're away for 5.5 days, you're into that 80%. That's 89%. So if you're away for 5.5 days, remember, if you got COVID, you're definitely away for at least 5 of them. For if you're away for 5.5 days, you slip down into that second tier that Luxon's not referring to. Again, I'm not actually doing this to defend that it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the accurate information. If you're away for 5.5 days in that term, then you're not going to be in the 90% and up bracket.
And then that's completely ignoring the other part of it, of rushing kids back to school with sickness into overcrowded classrooms.
Yeah.
That just seems like a one-way trip to a hiding, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have more kids off sick more often.
In fact, it kind of feels like it's one of the quote-unquote good things to come out of COVID, is I think it feels like some people are now, I've got the flu, I'm going to stay home, rather than I've got the flu, I have to go to work. I think in some workplaces, bosses, I've experienced at least, bosses seeing it differently now, where they're like, if you come into work with your flu, we're not even talking about COVID, with your flu and pass it around my team, actually, I'm going to be much worse off rather than you just staying home and getting well. I feel like there's a I'm not going to say all bosses, but there's an element of that attitude that's come out of COVID for some, and I think it's a healthy one. Same for school, Chewy. Do we want the whole class to go down with the flu because the kid came back too early, or do we want them to get well, come back, and then the rest of the class is not impacted?
Yeah, exactly right. But yeah, that's context, and this government doesn't do context. It does numbers.
Yeah.
But we're not going to look too deeply into them.